What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the PTCOFFEECAST, brought to you by The Movement. My name is Dalton, and alongside me today is my beautifully bearded friend, William. William, how are we doing today?
Can't complain at all, man. This coffee is like, have you had a sip yet?
I had one sip before we hit record.
It's fantastic.
It is very good, actually.
So good. I don't know what you did, but
It was made with love.
is that what happened? I also noticed we're both wearing the same hat.
Same hat.
That's pretty cool.
It's not uncommon around here.
Yeah, and you're also staying very hydrated, I noticed.
Yeah.
You want to show people,
So-
for any of you YouTube viewers?
One. Oh. Always branding.
Yeah.
Right? Little mint tinge to it.
Yeah.
I had a bottle about as big as this, but the top broke. So I went to Canadian Tire today and I go, "Excuse me, can you just point me in the direction of the largest water bottle you have?" She grabs this one, she goes, "Is this good?" I go, "That's great."
Yeah, how many liters is this bad boy?
This is a gallon,
A gallon. Oh, it's awesome.
which I think is like 4 liters.
It's like a jerry can.
You can get a bicep pump as well.
That's awesome.
But guys, thanks so much for tuning in. As always, if you aren't subscribed to the podcast, make sure you head over to your podcast platform and subscribe, whether that be Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you want to see our beautiful faces, make sure you head to the YouTube channel, subscribe there so you don't miss out on our video episodes. If you want to get any of our free content that we have available for you right now, you can check in our show notes. We have our Finding Your Why ebook or Finding Your Client's Why ebook. We have the sales PDF that we have there to help improve client outcomes. We also have Jenna's PDF that she wrote about 10 things that require zero talent, which I've seen some of those like downloads trickle in over the last little while, which is so cool to see them just kind of like slowly come in. That's one of my favorite things that we've put together. Jenna crushed that. And then the mentorship, which is what we're going to spend the majority of our podcast today talking about. If you guys are interested in joining the mentorship, we have our waitlist open for cohort 2, which is probably going to launch in September. We are over halfway through our current cohort, and it's been amazing. We're super pumped with it. The engagement has been great overall. We'll get into it. We'll talk about it. But if you guys are interested in the wait list, make sure you sign up. That way, when we do release our applications for our second cohort, you guys will not miss out on that.
I thought you were just going to go through the entire podcast.
Bro, you know how I get. I'll just start going off, and then I'll end up talking for 20 minutes, and you won't say anything, and then it'll be over. I'll just have the conversation with myself.
Should be an indication of how fired up we are about the mentorship, I think, though.
Yeah.
Like, we're always, even after the mentorship calls end, we're like, we're always like, I'm so fired up about that conversation.
Yeah, it reminds me of the early days of the podcast. Like when we first started podcasting and, you know, back when we were young lads and weren't very much in the world of rehab, and, you know, we're interviewing people like Zach Gabor and Nick Hanna and who else? Greg Lehman, and we talked to why am I blanking on his name right now out of the UK?
Adam
Meekins, like talking to all those people and just getting off those podcasts and just being so hyped up about the fact that like we got to do that. I have that feeling again, like once we get off the mentorship. I'm so hyped up about the interactions and, you know, the connections and the things that people are putting together, and I just get so hype about it.
Yeah, me too. It's like, just, I think for us, it was something that we put together. We thought that it was going to be valuable, right? But now to actually see what's occurring in front of us, that is what makes us so fired up.
Yeah, and it's been such a great group of people in this first cohort. Like, obviously when, you know, you're putting out something new from our standpoint as creators, it's kind of vulnerable, and like you think you've done a good job, and, you know, we've put a lot of time and effort into it, and we've gone through it multiple times, and we've had people within the movement look at it. We've had some of our people outside of the movement look at it to give us feedback, like before we like launch it into the world. And then you launch it in the world and you hope it hits in a certain way. You have this expectation of how it's going to go. And so, it's nerve wracking to like put it out there and hope that it hits the way that, you anticipated. And the group has been like super great as consumers of the product as well. Just like being involved in giving feedback and like interacting in the chats and like all the things you hope that happen has been happening. So it's been like really great. Honestly, like I'm very thankful for those individuals who've committed to doing this for the first kind of go around of the mentorship. Like it's very much appreciated that, they've committed to learning from us as well.
Yeah, what's cool is it's a diverse group too. It's not all physios, which we were initially like, oh, it's going to be physios because that's what we are. But we've actually got like chiropractor or two.
Yeah, one chiropractor, athletic therapist, and then the rest are physios that kind of range in terms of like age range of treating, like some people who are very fresh, some people a couple more years into the game. So that's been really cool. Us being like 5 years out. So it's like a good variety of experience.
Yeah, and I think hopefully everybody's going to take away some of the same things. Like there's going to be some shared value that everybody's getting, but I think also a little bit different, for each person. It's like each person's maybe in a slightly different situation, whether that's like their clinic where they're at, their time they've been in the career for, or maybe the stage of life that they're at. Like, we have someone who's hoping to start their own clinic, and so taking, different set of value from it, which I think is cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it speaks to the information that we're putting out there too. I think it's, we very much have tried to be founded based off like principles as opposed to like, this is the way that you have to do it. And it's kind of the way that we've created this mentorship is trying to give people frameworks and principles to work off of. And we give it in the context of how it's been successful for us and our model of care and how that also has evolved since we've started practicing. So, I think it's cool that people are able to take those principles and frameworks and apply it to their current circumstance, which a lot of our conversations with people are around how we can help them integrate those things into what they're doing. But staying true to like the principles of what's allowed us to have success and what we continue to want to build off as clinicians ourselves.
Yeah, there's been so many aspects of it that I have really enjoyed. I think for me, the coolest part, I'm curious to hear your thoughts, but what I've started to notice in the mentorship itself is that there's been a bit of a mindset shift, I think. And like, it's, what do I mean by that? Like, I think the mindset shift has to do with, I think a lot of people were viewing things laterally with their, like, with just being a clinician. And I think they're starting to see things more vertically. And so, laterally meaning, I think when a lot of people get out of school or they just start going, without really knowing where they're going because they need to get a job, been waiting probably like upwards of 6 years to actually be able to work and make money. And maybe these people are a couple years in too, and they've realized that they've just been taking courses and seeing clients, but, don't really know where they're going or where they want to go.
In terms of their career.
In terms of
like
their career.
What they want to get out of it.
Yeah. And so what I've started to notice is in a lot of different realms, people are stopping, getting out of that cycle of like, I'm just going to do another thing or get another skill, add another tool in my toolbox, and instead start to think deeper about myself as a clinician, about what I try to get from my clients when I'm working with them. I'm thinking deeper instead of more things, instead of horizontally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. What, like, when you say like vertically moving, like, what do you mean by that? Like, I kind of get what you're saying.
Like, I think a lot of people, when they're like, just for one specific example, actually going through tests with your clients, for example, I think a lot of people, when they get out of school or they get caught up in practice, they just try to get a bunch of tests done. And what I've noticed in our mentorship is people are starting to look deeper in one thing and what they can get from that. And same with every aspect of like the client life cycle, whether that's like calling or let's just say the things that you can do to enhance your client experience. I don't think people really thought about all the layers, and like what the depth to what every little thing that you introduce, whether that's like a follow-up process or delivering a plan, and how that influences like the outcome. So I think I've just noticed people starting to go like, oh, I have a way better awareness of all of how this influences the outcome, and then you have the power to change it. And obviously, like, starting from the beginning, it's like thinking deeper on why you're a physio, why you do what you do, and where you want to be, versus just like going sideways and just doing things. Does that make sense? So I feel like that's been a big theme in the mentorship, and it's been really cool to see people starting to get light bulb over their head, and you can see it when we bring up a new topic. It's like, oh, we're gonna go deeper on this, and like, oh, I see how this can influence like the client experience and how it can influence the flow of the session, and like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I've definitely noticed that, and it's always just cool to see people think a little bit more about the why behind what they're doing, and both like for themselves personally as clinicians in their career and what they want to get out of it, but then obviously like in their actual like clinical practice, like, well, why am I doing this? What's the bigger purpose of me doing this? What am I going to get out of it? Our hopes obviously with this is to give people something to have that will allow for them to implement it in like quote unquote a simple way that makes it less overwhelming for them to practice clinically. And the less overwhelmed they are, the more focused they can be on the client and the individual, and the more focused they are on the client and the individual, the better outcomes they're going to get for that client, but also the better experience they're going to get and more fulfillment they're going to get as like clinicians, right? And so it's cool to see those things happening, and hopefully they'll obviously continue to implement that and get to that point. If they, like, I'm sure they've already experienced that before, but have a little bit more of a streamlined way to have that be more consistent.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, like, whether are there some things that you've noticed that you picked up on where you're like, oh, this is cool, or?
Yeah, I'm sure there, there has been, considering that, we were going to do a podcast episode reflecting on how the mentorship has gone. I feel like I should have maybe had something on top of my head. But I'm always just a fan in general of people who are open to learning new ways that they can like level up their career or level up themselves or get more out of what they're doing. And it's been really cool to just interact with a group of people who are wanting to do that, and like a big reason for a lot of people joining the mentorship, you know, when I was doing the application process and like reviewing them all and then doing the calls, like a big thing that, you know, I heard from people as they wanted to get more out of their career and out of what they were doing, you know, and some people struggling more than others, even like in periods of like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore because I'm not getting out of it what I want and what I hoped. So I've just been super happy with the fact that like there's people stepping into learning what we're teaching to improve their ability to get the most out of themselves and the most out of their clients. And I think it's hard to do that sometimes. So that's been really cool. And everyone's been very open to exploring that within themselves. And, you know, we're not like crazy challenging, but like, you know, we're challenging people to think a little bit differently and like you were saying, go a little bit deeper and evaluate and reflect on like a lot of the things that they're doing in their day-to-day practice and ask themselves why and what this is meant to get out of it for them and for their client, which isn't easy to like, you know, go down that kind of path, right? But I think it's very necessary to get the most out of your career, your life, and then impact the people that you want to impact at the level that you want to impact them at.
Yeah, I think that's really cool too. And I think what our mentorship has done is really highlight like all these things and how important they are to your outcome and to your career. And it's prompted actually, I think, a lot of discussions between like our mentees and their clinic owners or their admin team. And most of the like team are actually benefiting from it, you know, like, oh, this is awesome that like you're taking some ownership of these things. I could see how this would benefit our entire clinic, you know. And then if it doesn't, and you've seen where you want to go with your career and there's a clear barrier to getting there, I think it's also highlighting that too. And maybe there does need to be a switch at some point in your career. And I think it's okay to realize that and highlight that. Or else you just get going through the motions and 10 years later, you're still doing the same thing that you don't really want, that isn't giving you the fulfillment that you actually want. So I think both those, like going off of what you were saying, right? It's like amazing to see how people are starting to take ownership of like how they want to operate as a physio.
Totally. Yeah. And that fires me up because like, I'm very biased to that as like a way that we should be navigating things. And like, you know, we talk about this frequently, but you know, at the movement in general, like, you know, our bigger vision is to change the way like people view healthcare. Right. And I think we speak a lot from the terms of like a consumer to like working with us, right? Like we want the consumer to see that, you know, we're looking at health in a different way, and we use rehab and we use education and we use all these things to help them realize that. But we also want to change the way people view healthcare from within. So like we want clinicians to start thinking of what's possible and what they can do as healthcare providers in a different way. And so we've always tried to figure out, okay, how can we do that? And, you know, we've done the podcast, and there was a big part of what generated this mentorship, right? And I was always wondering, like, how do we do this, right? And sometimes you feel like it's hopeless, like you're not going to be able to have that impact that you hope you could have with like what we're trying to do. But doing the mentorship and starting to interact with clients with the group and seeing them be open to learning, but then willing to take ownership over that and bring it into their clinic when, you know, maybe the environment isn't set up the best way for them to do that, or, putting themselves in uncomfortable situations by like having conversations with people on their team about like, hey, like, I want to try and implement this. Like, would you be open to that? And then having that go successfully for them just makes me have more hope that like, hey, this is how we start seeing change, right? And I think a lot of people talk about wanting to see change in healthcare and wanting to see change in the physio profession, and I'm with you on that. And I think that's a good thing. Like, I think it's a very good thing that we try to improve and level up what we do as a profession. But plenty of people are talking about it but not doing anything about it. And I've always wanted to try and do something about it, because I think that's the only way that you actually have change. And it's cool to start to see that trickle down and have an impact. So it's just something that I'm proud of for us, like doing that. And then also like very, again, thankful, appreciative, and proud of like the first cohort for like doing what they're doing, because it's not easy. They didn't have to join, any of that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, it's really cool to see the leadership skills of the people in our mentorship, right? Like, all of them in some way have demonstrated leadership within their own community, and I think that's what we want to see, and I think we want to help foster that, where you can take charge of your own career.
Yeah, and reinforce that to them, especially young clinicians. Like, a lot of the clinicians are younger in our mentorship, and like, bro, like, I'm blown away by the people in our group that are 2 years into the game, or even like not even a year in like the things that they're willing to implement and do and try and put themselves out there, and like the level that they're at with like their skills. I'm just so blown away by. So it fires me up to know like, okay, like there's people out there that are crushing it, which I knew, but it's good to like start to interact with them and be like, hey, like, here's some things to think about. Like, we were in your spot feeling the same way, and here's kind of a little bit of a framework that you can use to maybe speed up that process and not have to go through as much struggle to figure it out,
Yeah, it's cool to see without really even talking about anything clinical,
right?
Surface level clinical, because some of the stuff involves delivering clinical education, but we're not teaching people how to do a test or how to implement some specific modality, or even how to prescribe exercise, right?
Which is, we know how important that is, and it's a big part of what we do here, and it's something that we've learned a lot over the years. And the cool part is like, we've made such good connections with people in the space. Like, there's people out there that are absolutely crushing that aspect of it, and I'm gonna send all of our people to them. Like, Andy Chen dominates that space, like absolutely crushes it. So guess where I'm sending all my people to learn about how to regress, progress, lateralize, implement different ways to assess and do those types of things for individuals. Like, I'm sending them to Andy because he dominates that, right? And so it's cool to be able to like have a different take on it. At least I think it's a different take, and add something to the whole sphere of education to help clinicians make improvements and kind of level up where they want to go.
Yeah, totally. It's like this mentorship is there's specific realms we're trying to help you with, and a lot of it has to do with like being aware of all of the things that influence your outcomes and the quality of the care that you want to provide, right? But then there's obviously these things that you could really add. But we're hoping that this will really help you build a solid foundation to then layer those things on top of.
Yeah.
Right? And then also, the reason we sometimes use this like samurai sword analogy is because like you're going to come back to this stuff constantly when things go wrong. Like, when things go wrong in your with a client, it's almost never because you acupunctured the wrong spot or you gave them the wrong exercise. It's usually an expectation thing, a communication thing, some kind of a problem with the client experience, the way you did or didn't get them to commit. There's all these other factors that usually are the things that affect that. So it's hugely important. And yeah, it's been really cool to see this group working on these things.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're I think module 6, so I think or 5. Yeah, so I think we have like 2 more left in the hopper for the crew, and then we'll be wrapping up, which will be great. Like, as much as obviously we love doing it, I think like finishing that first cohort and then getting feedback and even us reflecting on what went well, what could we improve on, and like obviously implementing all those things for like the next cohort. Like, I'm excited to kind of dive back into that and see where, we could make improvements or what we did well, because we really have no bearings on it. Like, obviously we're always going to go through it. We go through it on a daily basis and we get hype about how great it is, but it's like we're going to get high on our own supply. So we just got to see if other people want to get high on our supply.
And I think we're hoping to like have some of our current
yeah
caffeinated clinicians on the pod and hear about their experiences, what they've been working on, and what they found is valuable from the mentorship. And then if people want to know more about specifically like what's involved, they should check out our website for it too, right? With which we can link, and you can join the wait list there too.
Yeah, that'll be linked in the show notes. There's a little information there. We did a podcast breaking down the whole mentorship. I think it was episode 199 or 198 or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but something like that. So you can check that out. Obviously, we talk a little bit about it in this episode. And then if you guys have any specific questions around the mentorship, feel free to DM us on Instagram at PTCOFFEECAST. If we get enough questions around the same specific thing, like, Will's going to be taking a little hiatus here as his new baby comes into the world. So I might have to run a couple solo podcasts maybe. So if there's any questions you guys had on the mentorship or just in general that you'd like me to dive into, send them our way, and we can get a couple episodes out, more Q&A style. But yeah, outside of that, we're super pumped about the mentorship. If you guys aren't following us on Instagram, make sure you do that. If you're not subscribed to the podcast, make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Make sure you don't miss out on any episodes. And then if you want to see our beautiful faces, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. And then all of our free content is in the show notes below for you guys to get if you would like that as well. But yeah, that's all we got. As always, guys, stay caffeinated. Peace.